Okay, cool. I'm a little bit new to the silent disco style talk. I like it a lot, though. I'm hopeful we can have a good session together. I'm excited to be here. My name's Tyler. I help lead the Applied AI engineering team at Redis. What is that? What is Applied AI? Applied AI Redis, basically, we are focused on working with our customers and our partners to build integrations, tooling, clients, things that help solve pain in the developer experience of using Redis, specifically kind of in the AI and ML ecosystem. So I'm really excited today because we have some really great industry experts and partners here that have been a customer of Redis for some time. So we'll get to them in a second. I'm really excited. We're going to welcome them on stage, and they're going to talk about their journey of leveraging Redis to build a RAG-style chatbot for customer support use cases. So quick show of hands. Who here is familiar with RAG? You've heard probably throughout this whole conference a lot of different talks on this. Okay, so a little bit of a mix. Well, you should be able to walk away from here seeing how this has been done from practice into production. So we're excited to get started. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the agenda. This is what we're going to cover. So I'll give you guys a quick background into Redis. Some people here I recognize may not know what Redis is as a database, so I'll do a quick 2-slide intro on that. I will welcome the Asurion team up to the stage, and we'll kind of transition more to a little bit of a fireside chat where we'll talk through their architecture. We'll talk about kind of what they were doing before, some of the pains that they had, and more interestingly, we're going to go into kind of like how they solved some of these problems that they needed to address, and what their plans are for the future. And so hopefully this should be engaging, and hopefully any of you guys at home for your businesses, your companies that are going to be working with RAG, this should be hopefully pretty relevant. So quick intro to Redis. We are a really popular database, to put it in short. We sort of are really well known for caching. That's kind of where everything started for us over 10 years ago. We're trusted by over 10,000 customers in production today with Redis, and that's something we're super proud of. And we also have a huge developer community. So another quick show of hands. Who here has ever used Redis in any kind of application before? Okay, yeah. So decent amount of familiarity all over the world, right? A lot of different countries. And I think the thing that's really cool about the work that my team gets to do at Redis is we work with customers in all of these different industries. So you see media, you see financial services is a really big one for Redis, where speed, and reliability is really important. And e-commerce, so Ulta Beauty, Dick's, things like that. So we've been working with customers for some time. Like I said, you know us for caching. That's kind of where our story has started. And of course, just like a lot of platforms, we've had to evolve, right, to meet the needs and to solve pain that customers had in other areas of their stack. And so there's a lot going on in this slide. Starting from the bottom, the way that we've kind of tried to approach our innovation is through really hardening some of the novel data structures that live in Redis. So some of you probably know about Redis storing as a key value store, right? So you can store a key with some kind of data underneath of it. Turns out that what that data underneath of it is more than just a string, right? So you can probably store a set, a list, a JSON, a fully indexed JSON object, a hash, sorted set, you name it. But that really, really powerful data structure server also has a query engine on top of it. So you can define a secondary index and run real-time queries across your whole key space. So these are all things that we've innovated on over the last 6 years. And what it's enabled, what it's unlocked, actually, is a whole set of use cases into the AI space that a lot of engineers, a lot of ML ops engineers or DevOps engineers may or may not be familiar with, but things like feature stores for kind of more traditional ML platforms. Of course, caching is always going to be part of the equation, or semantic caching, which we'll talk about today. We also have an event streaming layer, a time series layer. I think you get the idea. There's a lot of different capabilities that you can do within Redis, and they're all meant to be fast. The next piece is really about the ecosystem, and this is something my team in particular builds tools within. And so, for example, we have a whole tool called Redis Insight in Copilot. So Redis Insight is like a GUI that allows you to interact with the database, right? Gives you best practices, tips. Copilot is kind of the generative AI assistant that all of these tools tend to have these days. But the thing I'm really excited about is some of the integrations. So we build integrations into like Llama Index, LangChain, you name it. So that's all I wanted to say about Redis. You're going to get to see a little bit more about us as we talk about this architecture with Asurion. So without any further ado, let's jump into that. So I would love it if the slide would move. Got to really push the button here. Of course, this is going to happen right now. Let's see. There we go. All right, so our hosts. I'm going to welcome up Damien and Risha from Asurion to come join me on the stage, and we'll get going from there. So give them a little bit of a round of applause if you can. Awesome. Great. So you guys are from Asurion. Some of you guys may know Asurion as a company, and we'll talk a little bit more about what you guys do. But before we do that, can you guys each just do a little introduction for yourself? Maybe Risha, do you want to start?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Richa, and I'm a data scientist at Asurion. I've been working here for 4 years now. I build, design, implement, and scale large language model bots for our internal and external customers. And I've been working with Damien for like 4 years now. Damien?
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Damien, I had AI at Asurion, mostly developing bots for in customer-facing applications. That is for troubleshooting, just general customer support, but also helping agents serve customers better. We use a lot of technologies like vector databases, semantic routing, semantic caching, and just making scalable AI solutions generally.
Yeah. And Damien, if I remember correctly, you've been at Asurion for like 8 years, right? Long time. Can you maybe just give us a little taste of like what you've seen change since the time you've been there, which has been pretty drastic, I'm sure.
8 years ago, it was all about TF-IDF, creating some like vectors and words in a pretty mechanical way. Then there were some clustering, then some deep learning, embeddings, now generative AI. So things have gotten more and more advanced. But what really matters at the end is how do we build something that's valuable for the customer? It's all about keeping things simple. And I think for us, we've been able to switch very quickly when we felt like something was worth pursuing. And generative AI was a big realization for us about a bit more than 2 years ago, where we went all in on customer-facing bots, where control was the big factor, because we don't want to gamble on the way we serve customers. And fast forward to now, we are serving thousands of customer-facing sessions every day. It's been working pretty well for us, and
nice.
Scalability has been possible also with Redis.
Yeah. So we'll get into the architecture of how you guys have developed the solution. I actually want to take one step back though, and let's help paint the picture. What is Asurion? Help the folks here understand what your company is, what the platform is that you built.
Right. So Asurion is one of the largest tech insurer in the U.S. We have in the world. We have about 300 million customers worldwide, more than 20,000 employees, and our main business is, insuring consumer electronics and also doing customer support for them. That's what we've been doing so far. So customer experience is a very big differentiator for us, and we take that very seriously.
And so as you guys were looking to start solving some problems here using AI, can you talk to me about how the Simpler project came about?
Right.
Which isn't on the slide, but I want to hear.
So Simpler is now more or less of a subsidiary of Asurion, and the key idea when we started this as a new venture at the time was customer support and customer service generally is very hard to do well, very costly, and it often is seen as a cost center for a business. And so what we wanted to do is build some sort of flexible framework where independent freelancers could act as agents of other companies, and making something scalable, faster, cheaper, and better than traditional alternatives. And then later on, we injected bots into that and making sure we could serve customers as fast as possible, but also escalate to agents whenever we felt it was needed. And yeah, so generative AI has been a big part of this.
Yeah, and I'm excited to get into the details on that. I want to get a sense too, like as Simpler was starting to build this platform, if I recall correctly, you guys kind of had a quick jump where you started kind of at ground zero, had a couple smaller clients to begin, and now you've taken on some really large ones, like some big mobile companies, some other large device companies, e-commerce companies. So you guys have had to scale quickly, which is, I would say, a little bit rare because a lot of people that are in the space building some kind of a RAG system, it's still in a Jupyter notebook. It's still like in a little demo server somewhere. You guys have had to kind of address this head on much faster. Can you talk about some of the pain that you started
I think
seeing?
the biggest pain in customer service is that the volume is not linear. During the year you have some slow periods, some very high volume periods such as the holidays, Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And this can create spikes that are doing 10x on your volume. And so every year we were stretch testing our capabilities, and so we needed to be ready for scalability. And sometimes we could see some slowdowns, especially at scale and in our systems. Sometimes some brief interruptions during critical periods. And oftentimes also we were, needed to reset our systems, and it was taking more time than needed. And at the time we were storing our data within the internal memory of the service because it was faster, as an early solution. And it was becoming harder and harder to maintain, and that's the first time we brought in Redis into our solutions.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, and I remember one other key thing too I wanted to make sure we could tell as part of the story here is like you guys, you experienced a lot of this growth really quickly, and you were also at the same time trying to find a way to leverage, the advancements with large language models to help reduce the time to, I believe the term you used was like time to resolution. Is that the right term? But this idea that like customers are interacting right on the site, and the longer it takes, there's like an impact somewhere, right? They have a bad experience. Asurion has a reputation, right? You have to uphold. Talk us through a little bit about what the impact would be for these kinds of outcomes.
Yeah, the simple impact would be just longer resolution time. We were targeting the best possible customer experience in like responses, like chat responses within 30 seconds, email responses within an hour, which was unseen in the industry. And so these slowdowns were making it harder to keep up with these high expectations. Of course, we would still do well comparatively to the general industry, but it was hard for us to keep up with our high standards.
Yeah, for sure. And so, Damien, as the leader of this team, like you had to start looking at a couple solutions, right? Like, just help the room maybe understand the things that you needed to see in some kind of a platform that could help you guys,
I think the
some of the pain.
first thing we needed was a solution that we could keep with us for a long time, that could follow us in our growth, that we almost would not have to worry about. Like, we want something that was future-proof, a partnership, and that we could, expand on and add additional support left and right, and not have to, rely on many different third-party solutions and vendors. So that was the first point. Second for us was speed. The reason initially why we're storing that internally within the service is we needed speed, and we had no other ways at the time. Redis was doing just as well without us having to worry about scalability. And finally, flexibility was was important. We could just store anything whenever we wanted within our cache. And I guess we never had to worry about it. So I think that was the good thing.
For sure. And now, like, actually, Risha, I'd love to hear from you. Like, on the technical side, you started to look at Redis. You started to put together a POC, right, for how you're going to architect this. What are some of like the features or some of the things that stuck out about Redis that maybe you noticed would help you guys solve some of this?
Yeah. So I would say most of our services are hosted on AWS. So the first thing that stuck out was, like Redis provides seamless integration. So the friction to do POC was like very less, and then from POC moving to prod was really fast. So yeah, that's the one thing. As a developer, I would say like working with Redis, one of the things that stuck out to me was like just the vector DB and how like flexibly and like efficiently you can design any schema like an index within the vector DB. So like we all know with large language models how cleaner the data we store in a more structured formatted way, the better the responses would be. And vector DB providing this flexibility of having these fields and and schema and creating an index within it was, I would say, the one thing that I enjoyed the most. And the second thing is, of course, within the vector DB, you have the capability of semantic similarity, like doing KNN and figuring out what are the most relevant documents. So yeah, that's another thing. I think Damien touched on this. The other thing was speed, the latency with the caching thing. Like when we are dealing with customer support bots, providing good customer experience is really important.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's.
So I wanted to expand on that use case. For us, so as we moved into pretty early on generative AI for customer-facing solutions, we needed control. We needed to be 100% confident that the bot was going to say what we wanted. And so that comes at a cost of latency, because that means we have more calls to make, more lookups to do, more checking to do.
Validation.
Yeah, exactly. And if we're just able to cache a message, so there's some patterns in conversations, right? Customers often start, sometimes sessions repeat each other. Customers have repeatable problems. Sometimes, not all the time, but that happens. And so with caching and semantic caching, we could just look up previous sessions and see how it was handled and just reuse the same thing and bypass our entire framework and just show up a response in like milliseconds instead of seconds. And that's the beauty of it. Like we're confident in the response we're giving.
Yeah, I think that's big. And maybe to go ahead and jump into it, we've got a version of the architecture. We're going to spend some time talking through this. And for those of you guys that are looking at this, we've seen similar architectures. This is Asurion's RAG architecture for how they've built different chatbots. You'll see different AWS components that are part of this. You'll see different Redis components. But Risha, would you mind walking us through kind of how you guys designed this, given what we talked about?
Okay, so I would say when designing any large language bot, there are few things to keep in mind. The first thing being reliability and controllability, like Damien said, and the second thing is providing good customer experience. So the first, when we talk about reliability, if you think about any normal chat conversation that a customer is going to have when they come onto the bot, it's they'll ask an inquiry, and our job is to provide them good relevant answer. And that's where again we leverage vector database very extensively. We do leverage vector Redis vector DB in almost all our features and products, and the flexibility of again designing the schema and the index within the vector DB to store metadata and all other things, so that we can provide more relevant chunks and articles. So that's one piece I would say where we leverage Redis vector DB a lot. And then once we give out the response on the bot, we also need to provide them a good customer experience. So the second piece to it is how can we decrease the response time. So for that, how Damien mentioned, we leverage semantic caching a lot. We can think of like, on chatbot, there are a lot of inquiries that come in, and a lot of them can be repeated inquiries. So what we do is we save those transcripts and their embeddings within the within the Redis cache. So whenever a customer comes in, like either we can do an exact lookup, or like, we can do like closest to most similar, like, transcripts. So like, again, how he mentioned, when we do this, we skip taking the transcript through the entire framework, and the entire framework has like, I don't know, like 1,000, 2,000 prompts, like prompt words, and that's a lot of cost. So we are saving like a lot of cost, and on the top of it, like, we are also providing like low latency and giving like good customer experience, so that the customer can stay till the end of conversation and we can solve their inquiries.
Right.
So yeah, like that. Those are kind of like the two things. Another thing within the architecture that we have is the chat session management. So when the customer comes in, like they don't just ask one question, they ask like multiple follow-up questions. So we have to have some sort of like memory, so that we can manage like, the follow-up intents as well, like how to answer that efficiently. So for that, we leverage Redis cache, and yeah, it's been amazing, and we literally use it like in all our services and products.
Yeah, and just to recap, like on the semantic cache piece, like this is a concept that's a little bit newer in the sense that caching's always been a thing, but now with the ability to match, not just based on kind of like deterministic characters or token sequences, the ability to match on maybe very similar previously asked questions is actually particularly interesting here, because you guys are in a system where, one, you have a large number of users, and two, you also have like different product sets where there's probably similar questions being asked. After you're in production for some period of time, you can probably actually do some analysis to figure out which questions are common and popular there. And then to touch on the memory piece, I like this one too, because this is like a traditional Redis use case, which is, we call it session management. All that means is that we're like retaining some context. Maybe it's like user profile, or it's like metadata. In this case, it's a chat session kind of sequence, right, of messages. These large language models, many of you know, if you worked with them through the APIs, they're stateless. So you actually provide a sequence of messages, right, when you engage, whether it's with OpenAI or Bedrock or whomever. And so that gives you that kind of like distributed layer, right, to store some of that. Yeah, that's big. That's big. So I want to talk a little bit about the impact, though, because I think results are important, right? Talk to us about how you see this actually influencing now the customer journey that you've been on.
So we recently implemented semantic caching with one of our customers, and I would say the response time, like it went 50% down. Like we saved on latency from 1 to 3 seconds around, and we saw like increased stickiness with our users. So like, for instance, like, if the drop-off rate of customers coming onto the bot was like initially like 2x, it became like x. And yeah, I mean, yeah, like decreasing the response time is the one thing that we see with Redis, and the vector DB, like it takes less than 10 milliseconds. So that's also another thing. Another thing that we do is we also do cache first response response messages. So we did see like 4x increase in the engagement rate. So let's say when someone comes onto the website, like we do provide like when we do provide some sort of, okay, are you here for like iPhone not ringing problem? And the responses that come out like might be slow because like we have LLM powered, but when we use Redis cache, like that can be quick.
Got it.
So that increased like 4x engagement on our website. So that was one thing. And again, like Damien mentioned, like we do save up like a lot of cost by like not taking the inquiries via the entire framework. Rather yeah, like using semantic caching to just answer to customers' inquiry.
Yeah, and I think it's key too that you're able to measure the improvement in speed, which is great. It's easy. That's the first thing you can measure, right? Like the difference in latency. But the actual downstream impact also being higher engagement rates, more stickiness of the experience. That's something that's relevant not just for kind of insurance and customer support where you guys live. That's also relevant for all of e-commerce. That's relevant for any of these experiences where delighting the user is really important, making sure they're finding what they're looking for, in other words. So yeah, we love to see that, right? I think so often it's easy to have like, hey, we did a thing with RAG, and it's like, okay, cool. Everyone is doing that right now. But the fact that you guys are seeing results already in production is great. I want to change it a little bit here because like you guys being a little bit further ahead, like on the forefront than a lot of us in the ecosystem in terms of getting to that maturity state. Like, can you talk a little bit about some of the learnings that you had, especially designing the architecture, the POC, trying to figure out the tech stack, trying to figure out how to address the issues? What comes to mind?
I would say like flexibility, like again, like how you can embed like these different kind of data in different formats for different use cases. So it could be for bot, like it could be for like internal use cases like agent copilot or something different. It could be for any other use case like tagging, like tickets and stuff. So however, like you want to like design the schema of the data depending on the use case, you can persist it within VectorDB. So that's like very like flexible. And also this is like we can do in-memory semantic similarity. So you don't have to like write another code like to do like KNN. So that's, I would say that's one thing that definitely like brings a lot of value within our use cases. Again, the second thing.
I was going to add on the flexibility. I think what we loved with Redis is that when choosing Redis, we were not constrained of designing our solutions a certain way from the start. Typically, I'm pretty skeptical on having another third-party vendor in our code base, because that means we might get stuck in a corner after a while and realize, wait, we want to do this, but our framework is based on that vendor that will not be able to do that. And what we loved here is we can just cache whatever we need at any point, and we just retrieve it. And and that worked well. And another learning too for us is we always wanted to start small and think big. Because by starting small, you can stay very close to the experience you deliver to the customer, but you have to make sure that everything can be scalable after a while once you validate that the experience is there. And I think Redis helped us do that very well when we first started using them. And honestly, I never questioned Redis once it was in our stack. I didn't even have to think about it, which I guess was a no-brainer on the scaling side.
Yeah, I hear you. And I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of like where you guys are going next, or like some of the things you're going to be focusing on, because this is still just sort of the beginning. Like you guys have just gotten started with this, but you're already so far. This is a view of the world, like our teams get to work, like I said, cross-industry with you guys and other customers as well. And we start to see like kind of different pain points pop up like at different places. Like I said, the first juncture we typically see is like, hey, throw a vector database at it. Okay, like you need to be able to retrieve some information correctly. Information retrieval is a long-studied problem, right? Like the vector search is not new. We're being told it is, but it's definitely not. And there are other techniques beyond just vector search too, right? Like lexical search, a hybrid style search, or even like different kinds of filtering that could be included. And so retrieval and finding the right and accurate kind of information is like always that first jump. But the second one starts to, and you heard it here today, which is like this notion of like making the conversation and experience relevant. Being able to solve the like tell me more kind of problem with a conversational system. And that requires having some kind of state, or LLM memory is what the ecosystem kind of refers to it as. Short-term memory, long-term memory. Performance might start to become an issue, right? You guys grew quickly, you started to see some of that. There are different strategies to help address that. Semantic caching is one, there are others too. And versatility is another layer, even if you're starting to look into like agentic frameworks and starting to bring in additional tools, the ability to plan and execute steps, maybe leveraging multiple LLMs as part of that process too, and the need to be able to route queries maybe to the right knowledge base, route queries to the right process or to the right LLM for the particular task is something that could help with that as well. And then the last one, and sorry this is so long, but the last one is around control and governance. So depending on where you guys are in the industry, this chart may kind of move around, right? But all these pain points start to show up. Cost, performance, accuracy, all of that stuff. Damon, can you maybe characterize where you think your team is now and kind of what the big rocks are for you in the next 5 years or so?
So as I said, in the past few years, it was all about the customer experience. What is the end value we deliver? How do we make sure we are staying fully in control of the conversation? We're going to continue to do that. Simplify our logic. I know we showed a diagram here that was simple for good reasons. But yeah, we need to simplify this even more. But mostly reduce latency. As we said, customers are often a bit not willing to wait too long.
Yep.
And we don't want to lose customers. And so we want responses to come fast and also reduce cost as much as possible through moving to other LLMs or caching more, just streamlining the entire process better. But we don't want to do that too early until we make sure the customer experience is there and we're comfortable with what we're delivering.
And hopefully, at the end of the fiscal year, you look at the bill from the language model provider and you're not freaking out. The CTO is not coming knocking on your door. So I hope one of the messages that you guys got from this and hearing from these folks who've actually built it, I work for Redis, right? So I am biased here, and I wanted you guys to hear from them of some things that they've built and the reasons why. But what you'll see, hopefully here throughout reInvent, are a lot of different solutions and technologies that are quite powerful. And hopefully you'll also get that message that you do, in fact, need more than a vector database. Software engineering, data engineering, we have a whole set of tools and stacks we've used for a long time to make sure that systems scale and can meet the demand like these great folks had. So whether that's through message brokering or through caching or handling externalized memory, like we talked about, short-term, long-term memory, or even more agentic kind of processes with routing. These systems are a little bit more complex to do than just the simple pipeline that we see on LinkedIn every day. So this is like one view of the architecture, different than the one that we saw from them. But I wanted to make sure you guys could walk away with feeling, yes, you need more tools, and there's a lot of great ones. Redis can solve a number of these, not everything, right? I'm not trying to suggest you should just use Redis for every single thing in your stack, but it is meant to be flexible, and that's kind of the tool and that we've poured our heart into to make sure that you guys love it. So we were going to end with a little bit of like a Q&A, so you guys can ask them the questions that you probably have. Because of this silent disco vibe, we're not going to do that right now. The way it'll work is keep thinking of maybe any questions you have. When we come down from this, we'll probably corral somewhere in the middle. Maybe we'll walk around. Feel free to come up, ask questions. These guys are great, and we'd love to chat if you have anything you want to know. So without further ado, would you guys give these folks a great round of applause for their time? Appreciate the insights. The insights and kind of being honest about your process, I think, is big. So that's not it. There's one more thing I want to be able to share, which is Redis has been investing in this space for a while, as you know. But something has changed. When Redis started like over 10 years ago, the speed of RAM was slower than SSDs are today. And so that's significant, right? That's significant. And what's also significant is that we're seeing existing workloads of customers start to push into dozens, hundreds of terabytes. Trying to store that in RAM is expensive. No one wants that bill. And so oftentimes those tier one systems that still have to be responsive and have to be fast and scalable, other technologies or maybe less ideal technologies are having to be chosen. But Redis has been working on for a number of years the ability to basically replace your RAM workloads in Redis onto SSDs, onto Flash. And this is something we're really excited to announce. It's going to be available on Cloud Essentials next week. And the takeaway, hopefully the kind of one-liner, if you think about it, is that you'll be able to cache and store essentially 5x or more amount of data at the same price. So this is potentially a big deal, right, for some of you, maybe not for others. But this is something we're committed to, is being able to make sure that use cases like you heard today, other use cases that maybe some of you are working with can work still really fast, but also be cheaper. I think that's where the world's going. So if you don't believe us, that's totally fine. You can learn more about Redis Flex. It did have we have experimented with this in the past, so we've had products called Redis on Flash, auto-tiering you might have heard of. This is our latest innovation, taking all the feedback from customers and users over the last couple of years. So scan this if you want to come talk to us. We are at the booth, the expo, 1528, I think it is. Come by, there's some games and stickers and all that good stuff. So yeah, thanks for your time, everybody, and have a great reInvent.